And we're live. Welcome to the first Dev Summit of 2023 for Prometheus team. We do follow the CNCF Code of Conduct. We do take it seriously, so please follow it, but we never had issues, but still bears repeating. Another thing which bears repeating, if you feel enlightened to help with writing the meeting notes, that would be very much appreciated. Very, very much appreciated. I'm going to share it a third time just for, and also if you drop your email addresses into chat, I can add you to the editors of the document, so you don't have to do this weird thing with recommendation or suggestions in the doc. Basically, anyone who made it into this call has attained permission to edit this file at will just by joining this call. Last thing, please, in particular, people who are not on Prometheus team, please feel heavily and heartily invited to speak up at any and all times. That's why this is open and why this is public. We do want you to speak up. The only time we ask you to not speak up is when we have a call for consensus, which is only for Prometheus team members. Every other time, please try and speak up. With whatever you want to share, want to say, want to think is relevant, whatever. Yeah. Okay, Kevin, you have edit permissions now. What was one last thing? Oh, whatever. Let's get started. So we have a few at 5 votes. Yeah, and also for anyone who wants to have some, if you're not Prometheus team, but you want to propose stuff, just drop it into this meeting document and give us time to vote and rank the things. Of course, that is how we build and go through the backlog. So we have a total of 4 topics with 5 votes each. Let me see who we have in the call to match.
We have new proposals as well. Maybe we should vote first.
We're supposed to vote over the last 24 hours. We are not super. Oh, yeah, over the last 24 hours. Björn, Amara, Simon, Josh. Duck. Okay, from age and such, the integration list on Prometheus.io would be first, but given all the movement around native histograms, I would tend towards going with the native histogram push gateway support first. I see people nodding. Anyone agreeing, disagreeing? Okay, so let's then. We don't have Stuart on the call, but we do have Björn, and I think no, Gautham is. No, sorry, Gautham is not joining for the first hour. Then let's actually go through the discussion for the list of integrations on Prometheus.io. Over to Björn.
Why? I mean, I care about this issue, but I'm not sure if an expert. It's just I guess this is that we haven't still made a formal, official, public, whatever decision how we want to treat integrations listed on Prometheus.io that are touching the same system, but maybe different use cases, or maybe optimized for different in different directions. And we had this in the past, historically. I don't think we ever formalized this, but there was at least this idea that we would only ever list one solution for one thing. And we had a lot of discussion and a lot of also like, I don't know, disappointments where people had a solution that they found was distinctly different from a listed one, but they didn't get it listed. The argument back then was we don't want to split the community, so people should rally behind one effort. But I never thought this was true. It was on the contrary, if the list.
You cut out Björn.
You got muted, I think.
Yeah. When did I get muted?
Maybe
Oh, no.
somebody muted you. No, maybe accidentally button.
Anyway, I think that the argument was we don't want to divide the community, we want them to rally behind one project. And I think this had sometimes the opposite effect. If a listed solution was actually having didn't cover a certain sub-use case, then people would create multiple alternative solutions to cover that case. And if we had listed the other solutions, then they would at least have known that there is already a solution for that other use case. So in general, I was always in favor of keeping this a bit more loose, but perhaps you should just have some kind of rule, even if it's use best judgment or something. But yeah, it feels like we should discuss this.
I think there's one issue to keep in mind. It's a little bit of a the good thing about the current rule is we are preventing this. Oh, I also wrote a small thing, and I want to have it listed for PR and marketing and self-aggrandization reasons. But beyond this, I think it would actually make sense to allow more than one if there's a decent rationale. Where decent rationale is suitably undefined, it will probably lead to a lot of discussions in details, but that's probably just the way it is.
I think it's okay. I think it's also okay to formulate if they are sufficiently distinct and if they are significant or relevant, right? And then we can flesh out what exactly sufficiently distinct or relevant means as we discuss these issues. Right? I think we don't have to preemptively come up with very hard rules for everything, especially since we don't have the experience really yet.
There is also this alternative listing. Is it by Sysdig? I don't know. Perhaps we should also at least think how this relates to our list.
Yeah, so there is indeed an alternative by Sysdig, which is more like a UI that you can pick your exporters and all kind of things. I think that we could list multiple exporters as well if there is a good reason to do it. So I'm not against it as well. But this would be more a case by case.
How good is Sysdig's list? Could we just ditch our own and refer to theirs?
Well, we don't have any control of it, and a lot of things there is work in progress. I think they want to test everything, a lot of different things. So I think it's, I would not ditch our list. I think it's still useful and it's still nice for users to directly see in the Prometheus documentation pointers because we have search in the Prometheus website. So if you search for Nginx, you would find the Nginx exporter in the list, for example. I think it's still useful.
We could link the Sysdig site, right? Just say, in case you want to have even more others, you can also have a look here. I mean, we are not opposed to other listings existing, I guess.
How does the list that we keep there relate to things that we find significant enough to import into Prometheus community?
No, it's like the main thing which is done sometimes is making certain that there's a certain baseline of following current best practices, like looking over how do sample outputs of the exporter look like? Are they doing really weird things with their metric naming, or is this looking okay? Do they have any labels which smell of super high cardinality? Basically a little bit of a baseline check for new stuff, and that's it. For replacing existing stuff, they need to basically show that the old thing is more or less dead and abandoned before it's added. So that's how it's roughly at the moment. Just to open this and not, of course, I'm actively proposing this. We can also consider putting this onto the wiki and basically having a little bit of a free-for-all.
The free-for-all experience that we have on the default on the ports page is not really super nice.
Yes. That's why I'm not proposing it. I just wanted to mention it for completeness sake.
So my suggestion would be that before our list, like before the list on the docs page, we link to like github.com/Prometheus community, because things may be there that are just not listed, or that like we forgot to update the listing. Right? This is kind of the way I would think about it is, in what order do we want people to start looking?
Fair.
Like, and we want them to start looking at official exporters first, community second, the list we curate third, and the Sysdig list fourth. And kind of in that order is how I would put it on the list, and basically tell people, like, go through these things. Here is where you can find options.
I mean, this doesn't really address the point which Björn initially raised. We can also maybe potentially talk to the Sysdig people if they would be interested in putting part of their curation on the Prometheus website. My gut is that it's better to have some control over what we actively point to and recommend. And the first three of what you just listed are things which we more or less control directly. So that's something which I just have a better gut for, but it's also not me blocking. It's just
naturally, if we order it in that way, right? We also imply an ordering of confidence, which I think is also, like, maps the confidence that we have.
And we can explicitly call out this is a Sysdig list, not maintained by the Prometheus team. I don't think there's a lot to gain by talking to Sysdig if we somehow could collaboratively curate something. That sounds more like it will double the work and not give us a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I agree. In general, I completely agree with Björn's suggestion to open this up a bit more and just be more flexible about it. I think it will help the community. And like, I think the whole point of this page is to be helpful. And I would prioritize being helpful to users over being helpful to potential developers.
Yeah, I would agree with Matthias and Björn. Like, if someone comes up with a new exporter for something that already exists, but with a good use case, then we are not the one who are going to decide that this exporter is better than this one. Like, just assume good faith from someone writing a new exporter.
Just typing a little bit, just a second. Are we saying that we don't apply any duplicate checking, or are we saying we are just not going to be super intense about it? So are we basically okay adding everything, or are we okay adding pretty much everything after doing some due diligence?
I think we should word it, we allow more than one entry for one thing if there is a good reason.
Yeah.
I think that among the people that are now on Prometheus team, I think we have a good common idea what a good reason is. And if this assumption ever breaks, we can make the rules more explicit.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. So I currently have two. Let's try for those, and then we can try for a third one. Consensus: we will allow more than one exporter to be listed for any particular thing if there is a good reason. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing?
Perhaps integration or something, because not everything is an exporter there. Right?
Yeah,
And
integration.
for example, like a client library, I'm not saying we should now list tons of alternatives, but I think we could consider, if somebody has like a super lightweight instrumentation library, that we should list it in addition to the official one. And then we also have the chance to give a comment what's different about it, right? Why should you even consider it? And that would not be an exporter, for example, right?
No.
Ah, yeah, Promcat. Datadogs and Promcats.
Ooh, this is up to now. So let's try for this one again, and then move forward. Consensus. We will allow for more than one exporter or integration to be listed for any particular thing if there is a good reason. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Very good. Duck. Next one, consensus. We will point to our own Prometheus / exporters first, as in Prometheus org, maybe better. Yeah, we will point to our own Prometheus / exporters first, then the community / Prometheus community / ones, then our own list. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing?
So what about the Assistic list? Do we want to link it or not?
I would do this in the third one, because then we like layer cake. But we can also add it to this one.
I would just add it to this list for clarity.
Okay.
Unless someone objects to adding it at all.
I think the second consensus item is about the order. If you list multiple things for the same thing, then you do it in this order. I think this is different from the preamble that we were talking about, where we say, here are more things you can look at.
That's what I was thinking, right? That's I was thinking about this as the order of the whole page. Right. So
I think both to some extent. And I deliberately phrase it in a way which leaves it open in the details.
Yeah. I mean, so one reason I'm thinking about it this way is, do we want to duplicate the list of projects from GitHub into this list and keep it up to date at all times? Will we be able to do that? Or are we better off pointing people at, say, github.com/Prometheus community? If you don't find anything there, fall through to this list.
I strongly believe we do not want this, and I strongly believe we will not be able to maintain this at all times, but I also strongly believe that we need to do it.
Okay.
Of course, if we just have a random link and then we have a list, people will jump to the list and they will not click through the thing. But again, this is precisely why I didn't specify how to precisely do it, because I fear / expect we need some some experimentation there.
I mean, the preamble would be something like, if you cannot find what you need on this list, how about looking at the Prometheus community repos? Some of them might not be listed here yet. And there's also a list maintained by Sysdig, which might also be helpful, or something. Parentheses, not a Prometheus community maintained repo or whatever, like to make clear they are not affiliated.
We should then open this to more than just a specific third party. We should just say that we are open to linking to third party lists.
Then let's change should we maybe be less specific in the consensus and just say we will have a preamble that links to relevant other places, including Prometheus community? I mean, how specific do we need to be here, is my question.
As we already had consensus on this one, unless you want to be less specific for a specific reason, I would just run with it, because I think we have consensus and just keep discussing.
Fair.
So let's try. Consensus. We will point to our own. Also, please don't click into the consensus while I read it. That makes the consensus invisible. Yes, the person who did it is smiling. Good. Consensus. We will point to our own Prometheus / exporters first, then the Prometheus community / ones, then our own list, then the third-party lists. then 2 third-party lists. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Very good. Anything else regarding this topic? I think we can close it and move on. Good. We do not have a Gautam yet, so let's. We have a Björn, we have a me.
I think the push gateway thing is easy to handle. I don't think there's.
Okay. Then
yeah, I mean, it's essentially I can report the state of things, but I don't think there's a lot of whatever need for discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
So Stuart, I guess that is Stuart. What's his second name? Anyway, that's Stuart, not Stuart Nelson, the other Stuart. Push gateway native histogram support. So people notice that push gateway doesn't have native histogram support yet. So yes, that has to be done. I think I might have filed an issue. Yeah, this is now being listed there. Okay, so there's an issue. This issue has technical issues, as in push gateway accepts protobuf. Great, so we can just implement it. But then again, the problem is instrumentation libraries that do not support protobuf. How do they push? But then this is connected to the larger problem. How do we support native histograms in the text format? It's being worked on. So once we have a solution there, it can also be done in the push gateway. Contributions are welcome. I cannot do all the work on my own.
You are muted again.
Okay, I'll do it in a different way. This is this push to talk thing that apparently stops after a while. So we contributions are welcome. We have a few people, random people from random organizations who are contributing to native histograms already, and I kind of made a resolution that I should perhaps not write any code anymore on my own, just mentor others to do so. It's not quite true, but I will happily help people who want to contribute. So we get people into it, and then it will all exponentially grow and explode. And this is the push gateway thing. Is the same is true for everything essentially. Native histograms is a nice example for something touching everything in the stack. So, for example, this little prompt to JSON tool is, yeah, needs the support as well.
I have a question about support for native histogram in the push gateway. You still expect the user to push the complete histogram, right? You will not compute the histogram at the push gateway side.
Yeah, so the push gateway as is should still not be an aggregation layer, which isn't to say that we don't need such an aggregation layer. It's just I wouldn't put it into the push gateway with, like, I mean, there's this aggregation gateway or something, Weaveworks project, right? That could do a thing like that. I mean, if a project, we essentially could create a project like this or move a project like this into Prometheus or Prometheus community org, and we could also have the outcome that in the end we understand it well enough to put it into the push gateway as well. But currently I would more see the push gateway as being a really narrowly defined thing, because it's also like it's a very small thing, the push gateway, and this will kind of triple the complexity of it. So I feel it should be a separate thing, but I mean, you can disprove me. It's just fundamentally, it's a quite different thing. So for now, I'm not planning to do it, and not for native histograms either.
The stats.d exporter is like functionally an aggregating push gateway, just that the input doesn't use the Prometheus text format, which means it doesn't have the pending text format question, and so it already has full native histogram support. because the interface in the Go client library is super slick for this. It was actually a really, really easy thing to do, and someone contributed it like 2 hours after the talk. So
yeah, that's interesting. Could we perhaps put this into the notes somehow as well? I think that's important. George also asked about the alert manager side. I think, I mean, right now I don't actually know what happens if an alert has a histogram in the result. That's actually a good question. What will happen? But if it ever happens, it would probably be nice if the if alert manager would display it. I mean, it's like the typical thing, like the typical alerting rule, something is larger or smaller than X, that wouldn't work with histograms, right? But maybe something you have some filtering where a histogram shows up or not, and if it shows up, it should be an alert, and then you want to see the histogram. I don't know. It has to be thought through if there are use cases. But in principle, nothing keeps you from writing a rule that emits a histogram and call it an alerting rule. And then the histogram will be sent as the alerting value to alert manager. And I don't know what happens there.
and then what is $value in the template?
Yeah, it's probably 0 right now. But maybe that's yeah. I mean, but I think a lot of these issues are not clear cut. I mean, for pushgate it's pretty clear. But in many other cases, you probably need to think what's a good way of handling them. Or also, outcome could be, no, we don't want to handle it. Like the outcome could be alerting rules should never emit histograms.
So this is all on the Prometheus side, because alert $value is never propagated to the alert manager, right? So we would only get labels and annotations and times. So this would effectively be on the Prometheus side. Yeah, we can figure it out. No worries.
Is it? Then it would be only for the templating. Maybe, yeah. I mean, this is exactly the discussion we need to have. But I think that's really like it's very special topic. I mean, we need to go through this with the right people, but perhaps it's not a Dev Summit topic yet, unless we run into something overarching where we realize we have to agree which direction to go.
And in terms of decisions to be made here, I think from looking at what's already been happening, it seems pretty clear that native histogram support is already propagating through the org. And we just need to see, like, we need to solve each use case separately as we find them and as we understand them. Or anyone against using, like, propagating native histogram support through our projects wherever it is appropriate?
I think we'll find snags and hit walls, and that's
what software development is.
I would argue the other way around, that if we find places where we didn't push them yet, push and shove them and see what breaks.
Bjorn, will you do it behind feature flag in the push gateway?
Yeah, good question. I guess it depends how invasive it turns out to be. But on the other hand, you probably don't want to push a histogram accidentally and then be surprised. So,
yeah, but it's not. Yeah. Oh, but Prometheus will need to be enabled anyway to ingest them.
Exactly. Yeah. But then, I guess in an organization, if some people play with histograms or they play with native histograms, they don't even know it's experimental, and then they can push it to the push gateway, but then it's just ignored. It might be weird. So perhaps it should be gated, as in push gateway will reject a push without the feature flag. Although, I mean, it's protobuf, so it will even accept it right now. Let me think. Or whoever works on this issue, I'll help them think through it. Yeah, I mean, the consensus is kind of, I guess, I hope that was always the consensus.
Yeah. Let's try for one, but I think we have it. And I kept this as broad as possible on purpose. Consensus, we want to propagate native histograms throughout the whole Prometheus ecosystem. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing?
But do we have an approach, or it's just we want to do it but we don't know how?
Yeah.
I'm deliberately not scoping consensus to how. Of course, that limits, in theory, blah, 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 blah.
I think the differences in approach are very, very context and project dependent. Right? Like in the Statsd exporter, it was just no big deal because it's literally adding one line to the configuration format, and then you can configure your native histogram like exponential, and that's it. Right? That's all that was needed. There's more complicated and different, but like each project has different considerations. So I don't think there's like a D1 approach that we can formulate here.
So does that mean that the onus is now on Bjorn to be able to put that together, basically? Right?
Well, I mean, I think I read this consensus more as a call to maintainers and as a call to the community to, like, if you encounter a place where, oh, this ought to have native histograms, like, then let's think about what the problem there is, or like if there is a problem there, right? There might be none. It might just be extremely obvious, like it was in the Statsd exporter.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still so much to do in the native histogram space that it's not even like that we can like assign priorities. But at some point when we are like out of the woods, we can probably say we have like 5 remaining issues that really need to get fixed, and then we can like chase people to do it or do it ourselves or whoever, like find contributors. Although having said that, I think Ganesh was wanted a more strategic approach. So we have this histogram work doc where I think we haven't ignored Ganesh, if you remember. I think we have mostly ignored other repositories except like Prometheus itself and client libraries. So we could actually think about, we should add those points. Like, I mean, prompt to JSON is like just a little tool. Who knows who will need it? But push gateway is probably more widely used and should get this better sooner than later. We can link this doc. Oh gosh, where's the book? Here, I want to forget about this. Open work list. Okay.
Okay, perfect. And also to answer another thing about why this consensus is written in this specific way, it's a bias to action thing, where we now have a statement which, if you are in doubt, you can do this thing. And this also goes beyond just us and beyond just people who show up to this call. Because a thing which we've seen a few times is people point to things in our Dev Summit document when they have internal discussions in completely different places. So this is basically enabling anyone who wants to do it to point to, hey, those people said this is something we want to do. Let me do this. Does anyone have a strong feeling if we want to talk about staleness or remote write 1.0?
Let's talk about staleness because I think it will be pretty direct.
Then we hand over to Ben, Bjorn, or Julian.
I think if I brought this up, it's mostly because I'm concerned about remote write, not because I know a lot about remote write. Sorry, staleness. I want to talk about staleness, not remote write. That's a bit different, but nobody knows a lot about staleness. That's the problem.
Do
So-
we have a pen?
So the issue is that some third parties software expose metrics with timestamps, but because they collect it at a different time for some reasons. But because of that, Prometheus does not apply staleness, and the proposal is to have a boolean to actually apply staleness even if you have timestamps. So when a metric disappears, you just write a stale marker, and I think we should do it.
Okay, so what was the original rationale, again, to not have this currently with timestamps?
The rationale is that if you are using federation, you can get metrics not directly, but they could not be available for one script, and then you see them again in the next script. I think.
Yep, that's exactly this. We would write a staleness marker, and then a explicit timestamp could predate the staleness marker, and then the TSDB would have to do an out of order ingestion, which it couldn't do at the time.
All right, so this means the whole argument of now we can do out of order, so we can do this. Okay, now I get it.
No, I don't think. I know it is not related to that because I don't plan to enable out of order by default in Prometheus, so this would not be a default that would still be able to ingest out of order. I don't think we should do that actually.
I mean, we could recommend that you activate both. I mean, if you want staleness with timestamps, you may consider to also activate out of order support to avoid that particular problem.
Yeah, that's fine to me, but I would not make it a default at least.
No.
But I have myself been in a position where I needed to do some complex queries because of the lack of staleness marker, or just having to disable timestamp just to have staleness, but it's also annoying because you don't have the raw data that was exposed with timestamps. So let's just add the option I would propose. And
Would it
Can
then
anyone? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can anyone share like documents or reasoning what why staleness markers exist? We ran into them a while ago and we just support them, but we didn't actually find out why they are a thing.
I mean, there is the legendary PromCon 2016, 17, I don't know, where Brian
17,
explains staleness and what was the other big thing? Isolation. And that was the one talk that was probably best content that nobody understood. But like,
All right, then I'll look for that.
it's now, I mean, it's recorded. So if you have all this background knowledge and you watch the talk, it's an awesome talk. It just, you could see all the blank faces in the audience.
Well, like the very short version why we need staleness markers is because if you don't have them, then the latest value that maybe isn't even being returned by any endpoint anymore is still being returned in a PromQL query 4 or 5 minutes. So you'll have these flatlining time series 4 or 5 minutes, although they're not being returned anymore. And let's say it's memory usage by a group of pods, and you just turned down that group of pods and you brought up another version of that same app, a new pods, and now you have like double the amount of memory usage when you sum over it for a 5 minutes period. So you kind of want to avoid those periods where old metrics are reported while they're not actually relevant anymore.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
How common are the cases where you would want staleness handling with timestamps versus when you wouldn't want it?
yes, you would not want it for federation, but you would want it for CubeSat metrics.
So what should the default be?
Yeah, we cannot change the default.
We could change it in 3.0. What should the default be in 3.0?
It should be, I think, the same as in 2.0. But I think one subtlety that I would do is that maybe we should make it possible to expose a staleness marker.
Like have a way to explicitly say this metric is now gone.
Yes, with a timestamp.
What would that look like? Like what would we need to express that?
Well, we
We
already
can't do like NaN, just NaN.
yeah, but we already have that now because we have staleness test in PromQL package, and it is just instead of the value, you have just the word stale. So we are already able to ingest that somehow. That's how we do it in the test, and we could just reuse that. But that's a discussion for Prometheus 3.0, I guess. So,
well, I mean, did we introduce staleness? Oh no, we introduced them with 2.0. So yeah, I guess we can only really change that behavior in 3.0. That's fair. But yeah, then I'm all in favor of adding a flag first, and then or like adding an option.
Are staleness markers on the open metrics design? I don't remember reading about them there.
no. No, it's an implementation detail of Prometheus.
Yeah.
They are not even returned to the PromQL itself. They are only dealt with in the TSDB package. So you cannot even you cannot use them when you design functions and run selectors, and they are just ignored. They don't come to the PromQL package at the moment.
But if you have an open metrics client library that sends open metrics, does it need to set the staleness marker, or does Prometheus do it internally?
It's never in the exposition, which is also a reason why we don't transmit it in Federation, because Federation uses the normal exposition format. It is transmitted in remote write, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of a different thing. And Federation is kind of this weird thing, which, yeah, I mean, there are other issues because it used the exposition format and not remote write, and nah.
So Brian is raising his hands.
Yeah, what time would you put on the staleness marker?
It has to be the script time.
Okay. And that might be out of order.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
With
I think that's the
timestamps, it might be out of order, yeah. And as to what timestamp lands on the stale marker, that's a multiple of the scrape interval, and I believe it's
No. That is something from the talk of Brian, which is the only thing that is not true in that video that has been changed.
Okay.
So I mean, I think the thing here is, what did I want to say? There's kind of two use cases, right? One is where a metric just disappears and Prometheus detects this on scrape and does and this is what we currently support, right? This is what currently happens inside of TSDB. We then remember that this happened. Right now, there is no way to actually transport this information over the wire. Right? And there are use cases, which is where timestamps come in, where we are kind of transporting time slices of some other data source, right? And that's where kube state metrics is involved. And that's where federation happens, that just are supported in the text format with timestamps, but in that case, we don't support the staleness. And so, like, for me, thinking about it as this is a different use case for like transporting metrics, right? Then it should support also transporting the fact that a metric has disappeared. In the cases where you need to use timestamps because you're doing something other than just scraping, then it also makes sense to have that capability in the long run. Until then, a flag that just lets the operator override it is at least helpful.
Yeah, because you don't always decide when you shut down your cube state matrix, so it might just be down, and then you still want the stainless markers, even if it does not expose them.
Yes, but that's the other case, right? It actually disappeared, right? It disappeared from the target list. Then we know from scraping that all these metrics are gone. But cube state metrics, or like the Graphite Federation front end, whatever, right, might know for a different reason that a metric has disappeared, but the target is still there. And it should be able to transport that the same way it is currently able to transport that this sample is actually from a different time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually a big problem with CAdvisor because CAdvisor has its own scrape loop. And basically, yeah, it disappears data, and it knows that data has disappeared. But yeah, it's a super pain because we can't fix CAdvisor, and with this, and it exposes timestamps. And I think the whole idea that having a timestamp completely disable staleness handling is actually incorrect, and it's been a mistake since it was introduced.
So an alternative occurs to me, which is to put the staleness marker in with a timestamp of 1 millisecond higher than the last timestamp we recorded.
But the problem is that you don't know if it has been the last timestamp, because if your exporter exposes timestamps, it might expose an older timestamp on the next scrape.
Yeah, to me, if
Right, but I mean-
Prometheus write a sample to the TSDB, it has to be the script timestamp.
Yeah, and that's fine, because that should be like the timestamps coming from CAdvisor aren't random. They are the last time it collected, which should be in the past relative to the scrape, because it's basically got a live cache
up to clock skew.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, what you're describing is fine, but it will fail 1 in 1,000 times.
Sure, but I mean that the same thing is true without any staleness at all, right? If you have metrics with timestamps, this can happen. Staleness doesn't make that worse.
Putting an out of order staleness marker in makes it worse.
Yes, but if the timestamp is in the future, we can reject the scrape. So we honor times. So we honor timestamps. Well, so that's the question: is what's the current status of timestamps in the future? Because I think that's part of the reason.
No, I mean all of this can still happen like in the past, right? Let's say the CAdvisor loop is offset by 5 seconds from the scrape loop, and they're constantly 5 seconds apart. And then like CAdvisor gets a metric, like gets a value for the memory use of a container, and then half a second later it gets the this container is gone now, so it puts in a staleness marker.
There's no staleness marker.
I think that's like
so there's no staleness marker. When you scrape, the data is just gone, and that should generate the staleness.
Yeah.
I
think that's true, and I think it should. I think it could just do that.
Yes, it does that, and that's what it does do. Is it just the data disappears, but we don't mark it as stale. So what we end up with is that 5-minute staleness look back, and this causes containers to have memory utilization past their actual disappearance.
And I mean, to be honest, in this situation, right, even if CAdvisor later comes back and exports this metric again with whatever timestamp, mean, that's the way it is. That's what it said the reality of the world is.
Yep.
If we then show a gap in the graph because of that, then that is exactly what was reported.
Yep.
And I also think we should not really design this for the advisor in particular, because there are many other use cases or many other reasons why metrics can disappear. So we should just add that flag, that config option to the scrape job and be done. And that's a 5-minute job.
Let's do that at least. I think I would still like to think about like for Prometheus free, do we need this logic at all? Like, can we what's the consequence if we just get rid of it and simplify this away? This special case for timestamps, and we just deal with like if things happen out of order because someone exported timestamps, then that's their problem.
I remember a while back, while reading about the exposition formats, that a rule seems to be if a Prometheus client exports a metric, even if there is no data, the metric should not go away from the exposition. Correct me if that's not true, but I feel like there's a lot of use cases now that collide with this, like CAdvisor, like CubeState metrics, where the metric needs to go away or we leak memory or like leak metrics.
So that's a best practice, not a fundamental problem.
And the reason why it should stay exposed is because you don't know how many Prometheus server will scrape it. So you cannot say, I have been scraped once, I can discard the data. That's why you need to keep it exposed, because you don't know who will scrape you.
Right, but a lot of things right now don't do that. And I feel like that's where some of these problems are coming from. And I wonder if there's a better way to support these use cases. And the staleness fix sounds like one of them, at least.
Yeah. In reality, it might be better if CAdvisor to use remote write, but we don't like doing that.
I mean, okay, let's not try to solve all the problems at once. Let's put in this flag and take it from there. And then if we want to, we can think about it again for Prometheus free.
Again, can you repeat what this flag is supposed to do?
So currently there is a special rule that if the scrape included timestamps and a metric disappears from it, we do not write a staleness marker. And the flag would make it handled in the same way as a scrape that did not include timestamps.
Right, thanks.
Do you want to read it out, Julian, or should I?
Yeah, you can read it.
Okay. Consensus. I'm just waiting for a second.
Is the name of the option settled? Like, do we know that this is exactly the option we want to use? Do we have to decide on the name of the option here?
Good point. Yeah, an option is probably better. Unless someone disagrees, we can also keep it in. Okay. Same person is clicking into my consensus again. Consensus. We will create an option to scrape. We will create an option to the scrape configs to insert staleness markers even if the data was exposed with timestamps. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Very good. I have been informed that so-called humans need breaks when they sit for extended periods of time. Should we do a 10-minute or 5-minute break? And do we want 5 or 10? Okay, we have 2 votes for 1 minute, 1 vote for 5 minutes, and 1 vote for 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, the 5 minutes.
Let's do 10, and then
so
everyone can get the break that they need.
Let's meet in the middle. Let's do 5 after, because 5 after is 7 minutes. See you in a bit.
So I'm not exactly sure how they managed to get it done, but a team got dots into their metric names and into the TSDB.
It's impressive.
Yeah. Funny things with metric relabeling.
Just before you overshare, this is recorded. Just FYI.
Yeah, I know.
Good.
Weird things with metric relabeling. I think upgrading from 2.39 to 2.41 fixed it. Not sure why. It's not remote write, regular scraping. They have some metrics that an exporter exposes every single metric as a single metric name called gauge. The metric name is gauge, and the actual metric name comes from a label. And so they have a whole bunch of metric relabeling. Yes, this is Cassandra developers. They're special.
So we are supposed to have a Gautham, aren't we? I do not see my complementary Gautham. Booked him. Emote, or is there anything left? There is nothing left for the last topic. Or someone needs to yell if they believe that something is left. Good, no yelling. We do not have a com. Should we still talk about remote write 1.0 stability?
I mean, we have Callum, we have Chris.
No.
We have local domain experts.
Do we have a Ganesh? Luxury. Do we have Chris? I don't see him in the list.
I just joined for the second half.
Oh. Okay.
Perfect time.
Let's. Who wants to take it? So I'm just going to put Chris and Ganesh on the spot.
Sure. Yeah. Remote write stability. I mean, remote write has been around for quite a while now. I don't know of any significant plans for 1.0 that aren't already implemented, like that we would want to make a breaking change right now. So I guess the question is, do we just want to label it as what we have today as 1.0? Where is the topic? Were there other points there?
So my only concern is that for the first time in since the wall rewrite, basically, we have things actually ongoing that would be kind of significant improvements. But most of them would result in some sort of change to the protocol. So I think it's fair that would be considered a new version. My question is whether we would need to wait for a Prometheus 3.0 and introduce a new version of remote write. I would hope not.
I think we would need to wait for 3.0 before we deprecate existing versions. My own opinion is we want to have it, and we should have it for a long time, because by anchoring what we currently have as 1.0, we give it its own name, its own identity, and that means we can also introduce other things which have a different identity. For example, breaking changes, which just have a different version number, and we're done. Because that actually frees us up for precisely this type of experiment, innovation, improvement, whatever.
Yeah. So then really all this changed in the last couple of years has been the way the internal sharding calculation works. Nothing's changed with the protocol. So I feel like 1.0 is safe.
There was also this Prometheus structured remote write protocol design doc, right? What's the state of that?
I think Chris would know better than I would.
Yeah, the last state of that was it was trying to do two things at once. There was a change to the format, and there was effectively the discussion we've had around like transactional remote write. The state was we would prefer those to be done separately. I think either way, if they want to change the format, that's going to have to be a 2.0 on remote write.
Yep, which is even more argument in favor of just cutting 1.0 and basically having something with its own identity and then being able to do whatever with new things with a different identity.
So there's a question up a few lines. How are we going to handle native histograms? So that's in the code. I might think it a bit nicer to state that 1.0 does not include native histograms, but that might be hard.
Could we just say it's part of it, but it's optional?
Maybe.
So
Bjorn, what do you think?
I mean, the problem is we still want this escape hatch if we run into some issue with native histograms now and need to change something fundamentally, that we can still do it. But if it's already part of the stable 1.0, that would maybe a break of contract. So
should we
that's
say
why, I think the exponentiality is transmissive, whatever. Whatever.
Infectious. Yeah. So I guess then we should make it the version of remote write before histograms, right? Native histograms, right? That should be 1.0.
Yeah. And I think native histograms could be a 1.1. Like it is just adding a feature. It's not a breaking change to the protocol.
I'm wondering because I know there isn't implementation of translating OpenTelemetry exponential histograms to Prometheus remote histograms. And the place where this is instrumented is in the remote write exporter in the OpenTelemetry collector. So basically,
so that one is already producing one remote write 1.1.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if we did make a 1.0 now and throw exponential native histograms out, will it still work, or what's?
I wouldn't suggest actually removing support of native histograms from Prometheus. Right? Prometheus can already be beyond 1.0.
No,
the question is basically, what do we specify as 1.0? Does it include native histograms or not?
No, I think there is a misunderstanding because Fabian, I don't think that the feature you say is using native histograms now.
Why?
Because they are not supported in the protocol. So I don't think that OpenTelemetry is using the native histogram. It's sending the native histogram to Prometheus. They probably convert that to classic histograms.
No, I mean, isn't it supported in Prometheus remote write? Let me find maybe I find the PR.
More trivia. I believe the header is currently saying 0.1.
Is what I was just looking up. Yes, it is. Header is 0.1
remote write
today.
version.
So we could have, effectively, we could customize that based on if there is a native histogram in the payload. We could do 1.1. If there's not a native histogram, it would still be 1.0.
Yeah, sure.
Is that what is being proposed right now?
Setting it to 1.0 is a change, but I think we should do that.
I mean, so I think I'm thinking about it to two different potential compatibility issues, right? Someone sends something to Prometheus that includes a native histogram. That's fine. Prometheus can deal with that. Then there's the other side, Prometheus or someone else produces something that is remote write and sends it to a third party that does not support native histograms, or to a Prometheus that doesn't support it, right? What should happen then, and how can it? How could that negotiation happen?
Yeah.
The problem right now is everything is 0.1, right? Nobody actually knows what they can send or what they can expect to be sent. So by being explicit that, for example, saying 1.0, no native histograms, 1.1 has native histograms, we make a negotiation possible.
Yeah. Plus or minus, I don't think you want to say no. I think you want to say not mandatory.
Yes. Yeah. Like the thing there would basically be if you have, say, Grafana agent sending remote write to or Prometheus in agent mode, sending metrics someplace, right? Can it know that it shouldn't send native histograms over this stream? And what would it do with that information?
Today, nothing. This could be something in the future that we could add some level of content negotiation.
But the example you give is interesting because you speak about the agent where you don't want to read the data locally. So in that case, you would not enable the histogram at all. Because it's still a flag that you have to enable on Prometheus side. So if you don't ingest them, you don't send them.
Right now, yes.
Yeah, I think in order to do like content negotiation, we would have to add a bit more. We would have to add some way of asking the server what versions do you accept. That doesn't exist in the remote write protocol today.
Yeah. But I think giving it like distinct versions already helps with that.
Yeah, I think it helps towards that for sure.
We're talking about remote read write mostly, but there is remote read, which is also advertising 0.1 at the moment.
And someone in the CNCF Slack actually asked about, like, is this actually stable? Can I rely on this?
Read or remote write?
Yeah. Remote read.
I just add the pull request from Prometheus that produces the native histograms. So it's actually merged.
So remote read has effectively two versions: the one shot and streamed, and those are both numbered 0.1, and the content type header is used to distinguish between them. So marks for consistency.
I mean, in a way, content type is the right header to use for this because there is like well-established mechanisms for content type negotiation. right? So it could be different content types, but I think between Prometheus remote write with or without native histograms, those are not different content types. The remote read, they are really these are really different. I only vaguely remember this difference, but it sounds like there are quite different ways of talking to one another. Whereas this byte stream may contain only only float values, or it may contain native histograms as values, is a minor evolution of fundamentally the same thing. But I think in both cases, the negotiation should happen in the content type, and the content type should include the version.
Okay, I'm going to argue that more research is required before we decide what we're doing. I guess we can resolve that we want to declare 1.0, but I don't feel we know what that is.
Is there anyone volunteering?
Do more research.
I guess we can kick that back to the people who are driving the 1.0, right? Like, this is the open question we have, is what to do about native histograms. I think the other, what do we do after we have these versions, like content type, or like what header, or how do we actually negotiate? Those are then separate issues. We don't have to wait to declare a 1.0 we don't have to wait for that just to say, oh, there is a 1.0, even if we don't know how we're going to negotiate yet.
I also saw somebody put in a note about hotel collector maybe waiting on the structure remote write talk. I read through that briefly, and it doesn't, like, there's nothing in the protocol that says you can't send all samples in a single remote write request. Like, the protocol itself allows that in its existing format, and there seems to be a misunderstanding of that. And I think maybe publishing a 1.0 we could clarify things like that, saying, like, probably even should send all of the samples for one scrape together, or all the samples for a histogram together in one request, but it's not strictly required.
Could we say that
writing up the spec would help some of that?
Should we say that you should do something if Prometheus is not doing it?
I think we should. All right. I don't think there's a problem with that. It's something Prometheus would want to do, or it's something we know Prometheus wants to do. So I think it's a reasonable should. You don't have
Yeah,
to be perfect.
I agree with Chris. I think you're right. Like, at least spec is ready for that, so we don't need to change anything, and we can negotiate, what we want, what modes of this transactionality, or like kind of this structure remote write question, really. If we want to make sure the histograms are together in Prometheus, we can add that later on. So I think it's a great idea to clarify this.
Yeah. So maybe the action item is write a draft spec, get comments on it, and we can decide.
There was
what to
something
do from
already.
there.
There was something for.
There is
There is a
document
doc on
already,
this.
yes.
Yeah.
Document.
Maybe it's just resurrect that.
But let's note your
The
your
question is
idea.
if we can just take this rubber stamp it as 1.0 and then really shove everything which is not currently being done into future versions.
But since the protobuf already include the native histogram, even if in remote write, I would say that we could have them in 1.0 but mark them as experimental, just like we did with Prometheus.
I think that's
You
a
mean
good idea, because then
experimental instead of
the
optional?
existing OpenTelemetry exporter would already work with 1.0. Because they made exponential histograms default now, so everything that implements them also will produce them, and it would be like sad if now Prometheus doesn't support it anymore.
I mean, we're not going to remove support for something that's already in there, right? We're just going to say that Prometheus is already using a newer version of the protocol.
Yeah.
I mean,
effectively,
the
we would do.
question.
Go on.
The question I would have is basically, or the way I would phrase the question is, do we want to specify remote write 1.0 with experimental native histogram support, or do we want to specify a separate 1.0 that does not support that does not include native histogram, so that someone else can say we support remote write 1.0 but not 1.1, and be explicit about not supporting native histograms, right? As a receiver,
native histograms in 1.0 because they're not stable.
Yeah. But isn't marking them as experimental as opposed to optional in 1.0 an actual good and feasible way? Of course, we do give a specification for something which is currently in use, but we make very clear that this might actually be changing.
It's not really in use. Like 3 people have tried it.
What do you mean it's not in use? OpenTelemetry Collector is doing it.
Native histograms.
Yes, but again, nobody is using it in Collector. So if you remove it, I don't think people will complain.
We're not about removing it. We're talking about a legalistic declaration of what is 1.0. And I think it's totally reasonable to declare what is 1.0 to be the thing that was stable for about 3 years. I think it's completely unreasonable to declare something that we're only put in a couple of weeks ago as 1.0.
Yeah, I agree with that. My vote is like in this doc, like let's just declare we could write up 1.0 and 1.1, and these are the 2 formats, and release them at the same time, effectively.
And then Prometheus would use 1.1 because it already uses native histograms.
Exactly.
But would that mean that remote write exporters that currently produce native histograms will continue to work? If switch to
I mean, right now nothing actually checks the version.
Yeah, I don't think we should check the
And
version.
we're probably going to
so
need
1.1 will
special
be
handling for the. Sorry.
Okay, it will be backwards compatible, but just have some additional histogram entries. Okay, I
so the underlying checking the version, it's checking that it's 0.1, because that's the only version that anyone's sending right now.
So I think in the future, right, we may need special handling where we say, well, if it's 0.1, it's probably 1.1, right, and we accept it as such. But then going forward, the OpenTelemetry exporter can say, I'm producing 1.1, and someone else can say, I'm accepting 1.0. Right? And then we can figure out if we actually need to do a negotiation there or whatever, how we deal with that. But at least people have a word to say about what it is that they support.
The underlying motivation for naming this 1.0 is to enable precisely the type of discussion which we've had just now.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have something where you have a name to it, you cannot have a proper discussion about what is a potential change and what do we need to support to actually basically support the new thing already. No, it wouldn't hurt the adoption of native histogram. Arguably, this actually enables and speeds up the adoption of native histograms, because we have something where we can say, this is the stable thing, which has been working for 3 years, and this is the other thing which we've already been working on, but we get to talk about how do we do content negotiation. We get to talk about, is a 1.0 automatically equivalent to a 1.0, similar to 0.04 being more or less equivalent to 1.0 on the exposition side, and things like these.
Yeah, and I think it will also help service providers to be able to say, we now support 1.1. Right? Now we accept native histograms. I think it just gives the whole thing a clearer name if we say. So I like this idea more and more of saying the old way, what's specified without native histograms, that is 1.0. Even though Prometheus is already beyond that, that doesn't matter, and nobody forces us to have a specification of Prometheus as it is today. We can totally write a specification for Prometheus as it was 3 versions ago, and then have another one for what it is doing today. And that would then be 1.1 or 1.1-RC0 or beta 1 or whatever we want to call it.
Seems like we have consensus on this, or at least can call for it.
Yep, give me a second. Let's look at the definition. In the second sentence, just to get the signaling right, if someone is reading this in absence of looking at the recording. Consensus. We will tag what has been working for the last roughly 3 years as 1.0. Our intention is not to block EG native histograms, but to speed up implementation of new editions and versions by giving things a unique and specific name. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing?
I'm just wondering, so that still means that Prometheus will support this next version beyond 1.0.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we could we could do a second call for consensus around 1.1 and things like that. But yes, we'll definitely still support native histograms being sent to Prometheus.
I think that would be cool to explicitly state that so that nobody thinks we're dropping it right now.
Okay, yeah, totally fine. That's what I tried with the second sentence. Give me a second, then I'm actively. Then let me rewrite the whole thing.
I mean, we could even I would propose the consensus that I propose. Prometheus will accept native histograms as an unspecified extension for now. Or do we want to actually specify?
No. Give me a minute. Give me a minute, please.
I also think that we should not do content version negotiation until it's actually a real problem.
Yes.
That's completely fine. That's completely fine. That's actually one of the beauties of, like, we have the concept for it and we know how to do it, but we don't have to enforce it unless we choose so. We'll continue to. Okay, so
one question about content negotiation and stuff. Would it help future compatibility if we now mandate, like in if you call yourself 1.0, not 0.1, you have to put that in the content type header.
It's not
so that we don't end up with a 1.0 that includes no version in the content type.
Isn't kind of obvious that you must send the correct type, even though we don't check it on recipient on.
Nothing is obvious.
Okay.
Especially if it's about a specification, I think it should
just
be stated.
Yeah, I think that's in that draft spec is actually that you must send this set of headers with these values that's currently in there. I think that's something like, like the output of this is we still need to update this draft. Maybe we just totally rewrite that spec. That's still an output of this.
Yeah, there's a X Prometheus remote write version, and it right now it states 0.10. So we should either change that or.
So my suggestion would be in the maybe we don't want to do that for 1.0 because we want to specify what's the latest version, like what specify what's actually been going on. But I guess my suggestion there would be, like, if we ever want to do negotiation, content type is right there, and we should do it with content type, not with custom headers. And to make that possible, like that will be much easier to do if, starting with 1.0, everybody already includes that in the content type, that it is 1.0.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. Let's put that into the doc. Let's keep. Let's put a note there. I'll put a note in here at least.
We can also do capabilities, and the capabilities should be labels.
That's what I was wondering. Is like, can we still have X proto buff and then do just like we can figure that out on the doc.
I think we can just make this as a note. Let's do the 3 dances for consensus. So first, consensus. We will tag what has been working for the last roughly 3 years as 1.0. All agree? Anyone disagreeing? Good. Second one, consensus. We will continue to accept native histograms and intend to release 1.1 with them. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Third, consensus. Sending must set the correct version. It's a box. Well, whatever. It's understandable. Consensus. Sending must set the correct version, but we will avoid validation or enforcement on the recipient side for as long as feasible to enable the transition from 1.0 to 1.1 and beyond. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Chris, is this a yes or no, or a I want to? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Read it again.
Cool.
And also, I'll put it on sometime next quarter. I'll take the action to actually update the specs and things like that. Just want an owner of that, so I'll volunteer for that.
We have 4 with 4 votes. I would tend towards just taking the oldest one. Well, that's me, actually. Yay. Also a little bit more on the enablement side, if/when we reach consensus AIX support. Full disclosure up ahead. You can read it yourselves anyway, but also for the purposes of this recording, Grafana Labs has a customer who would like to have an agent running on AIX. Of course, they use AIX. Of course, they use it. Whatever. And there's bits and pieces which would need to change. It would be easier for us and potential other users of Grafana agent and or Prometheus agent and use it on AIX if we were able to make those changes directly in Prometheus. The flip side to this is it wouldn't directly benefit Prometheus because I don't think anyone would be, or it wouldn't directly benefit the binary of Prometheus. Of course, I don't think anyone is planning to actively run Prometheus services on AIX. So it's a little bit on this in between. And the thing is, do we want to enable and merge reasonable work going towards AIX support, or would we prefer to keep it outside?
So I
think it makes sense.
My idea is to do like we do for OpenBSD, like we do not publish the binaries for it, but you can build it, but you will have bugs. But you need to build it yourself.
Are you talking about the agent or the server?
Any. I mean, you will need to, I guess you will need to get the server to compile at least on AIX to build the agent because it's the same binary.
If just assuming for a second, if we were able to get the agent stable on AIX, would you also be against publishing the Prometheus agent? I mean, with my Grafana head on, no one needs the Prometheus agent for AIX. Of course, it's a Grafana agent for AIX, which is the actual goal. But with my Prometheus hat on, it would be nicer to support anything which we can feasibly support.
I don't see why we would do that, because probably that within the team only very few people could support that actually if someone comes up with an issue with AX.
Yeah, and given the limitations that this is probably going to have, I think I would also say let's not publish a binary unless if in half a year someone comes around and says, hey, can we have official binaries for this? Or like, we want to sponsor Julian to support this, and we're going to send him a mainframe to do it. Then sure, why not? Right now, I don't think we have, I just don't think it's worth it to put in the support work. But I do think that especially in the core bits that get compiled into other bits, they should compile on AIX or like be conditional and not try and compile on AIX. I think that part of the support, which is what I think is Richie is asking about, should absolutely be in the code. And if we can make all of Prometheus, like the whole Prometheus server, compile on AIX, that's a nice bonus.
So we also made part of Prometheus compile on WASM, even if it will not work. But if you want to compile Prometheus in JavaScript, you can, because the PromQL engine needed that, and now you can compile the PromQL engine. But if you try to use the DSDB stuff, it will not work.
That would actually be fun. Have a Prometheus in your browser. Okay, but I think I have a consensus, because just as a note, I believe that if/when we have battle proven this on Grafana Labs side, that the Grafana agent is working reliably at scale, then we can probably also enable the Prometheus agent, and it would be nice for Prometheus to do it at that point. But let's skip this for now. I'm just
It's not only everything stable, it's also that we do not differentiate the feature for each architecture, and this would make us disable some service discovery. So it would not really, it would remove features actively and not only be. So
yeah, I don't think anyone wants this. So yeah.
I mean, if you use on AX, you cannot use the Docker SD, for example. That would not make a lot of sense for the users. It would be a precedent that I think it is too costly just for AIX.
I agree, and we would have to list it in the documentation everywhere, and let's I think support in code, like for the bits that are needed, like for whoever needs it enough to put in the work, we should accept that work.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it's good enough. I also suspect people who run mainframes don't pull random binaries from the internet a lot.
So let's try for this one. Consensus. We will accept reasonable patches towards supporting AIX. We will not publish binaries under the Prometheus org for the foreseeable future. We will not publish AIX binaries.
I think we need to be careful with this, because I think for some exporters, we already do.
Yeah.
AIX binaries of the Prometheus server or the Prometheus. Okay, consensus. Wait. Consensus. We will accept reasonable patches towards supporting AIX. We will not publish AIX binaries for the Prometheus server or the Prometheus agent for the foreseeable future. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Very good. And I'll just fill in the note which I just made and Julian's reply after I kickstart the next thing. We have 15 minutes left. Björn, revisit metric name removal during PromQL evaluation is probably too long for 15 minutes.
Let me reread this.
I should also probably vote for this one, even if it's a little bit late.
And maybe a quick interjection. Last summit, there was talk of maybe trying to meet around FOSDEM.
Good point. Who is going to be at FOSDEM? You will probably find most of us on Sunday in the monitoring and observability dev room, I guess. Yeah. I mean, we can also try and make some specific plans, but maybe not during this call. Maybe do it on the mailing list, but or just an email. But it actually makes sense. Yes. Same question for the. Well, no, KubeCon is still a little bit out. So, Björn, should we or should we not?
I think we should not, but not necessarily because of time. But I think like Julius and Ganesh would be people to really that I want to have in the discussion. On the other hand, like the lightweight suggestion I have for this is already described in the issue. And I think that's easy enough that we can just implement it, even if in the end we decide we don't want this. It would still be good to implement it and see it in action. And the third thing is that Sam Jewell, who was super keen on this, now found a workaround for his particular use case. So he isn't that keen on it anymore. It would have been a nice starter project for him to actually contribute, but we'll see. So it's like it's neither super urgent, and we don't have the people in the call that I would really like to hear their opinion. So that's mostly the reason why maybe let's skip until next time.
That's probably too big. Replace Elm with React in Alert Manager. Do we still have a Josh? We do have a Josh.
We do. This one exactly what it says in the tin. I'd like to propose the removal of Elm in favor of React. It's the natural step, given we did the same in Prometheus. Well, I don't think not sure we replaced them with React. I think we just. Oh, I think we just did. I think it's hurting contributions in the front end. It's very hard to do any sort of even the minimal bug fix in the front end with the current state. There's even no binaries for Elm in Apple Silicon, so it's to figure it out if you want to do something like that in your own machine. Yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, that last one to me is a sign that it's not a healthy ecosystem. Because I mean, front-end developers love Max, and if they haven't come up with ARM binaries for Elm yet, then probably not that. Probably they don't like Elm all that much anymore.
But do we have people who are willing to do the React work, who commit to kind of work on, like, build the React UI?
So I think I can get the staffing for that project in order to make it a reality, but we need to be willing to change it in the first place, right?
I mean, to look at this from a different angle, they who do the work get to decide. And the reason why we're even discussing this is, of course, there is no substantial work being done. So I don't even have a strong opinion on Elm or React, but my point is, I think it needs a good, reliable, long-term commitment from either side, because it feels as if we have had this discussion about Alert Manager UI since 2016 at the latest, and the reason why it feels that way is because we did. So this is something which has literally been going on for 6.5 years by now, at least.
I mean, yeah, at the time, the people who did the work did it in Elm, right? And that was okay for a few years. It's just that people's lives have shifted. And also, apparently, like where the attention is and how to build UIs in the year of our Lord 2023 has shifted. And so I think it's not a problem that we chose Elm at the time. And I think it's just eventually we just need to replace it because the world has moved on.
I mean, I would not like to. I mean, none of us is an Elm expert, so we don't know why there is no binary for the Apple hardware. We're just speculating. I just think this whole argument about it is too alien. I think we should not explicitly not use this argument. If we had ever used this argument, we would have written Prometheus in Java back then in 2013, and probably everyone would laugh at us, and the world would not use Java, would not use Prometheus. I think this is really not an argument at all. And back then we had very engaged contributors for Elm, and we had engaged contributors for React. And I think the mistake we made was that we had a very intransparent way of deciding this. I mean, to be super blunt, I think Julius was just getting into React. He liked it. There's a big ecosystem. It's clear that it's attractive, but he completely ignored that there was Worm, Andre into it, and Stuart Nelson was into it back then. Now, I don't want to speculate if Stuart Nelson would still be in the project if we had doubled down on Elm, but I know that Andre was super engaged, and we had like 2 engaged people for React that also disappeared later. So I don't really buy this argument. It's all about getting more contributors. I think the more important argument now is that React is now so tightly bundled with Prometheus, and we are certainly not re-implementing all those UI features in Elm, and that's the decisive argument. And I think we should not say Elm is just weird, and this is why we dropped it. And we should also try next time better whenever we do those decisions to make it transparent, because even if the decision in the end is we do React, then we would have an Andre who would have said, okay, I understand your reasoning, and not a very upset Andre who is frustrated.
Being very blunt, I also think that person has separated himself from the project a little bit for whatever reasons those were, right? So we're talking about people as opposed to technology, and there's also that other factor right there. It's like there's no one to help us maintain the current code that we have there, and we have no one within this call or within the team that has the expertise to be able to do it. Well, maybe not the team, because it's part of the team too.
No, I'm totally up for deciding this. I just think we should not put into I mean, it's in the protocol, of course, but we should not put it as the reason that Elm is just too alien. I think this would be a misrepresentation of how we have built Prometheus. What I said, right? If we had this attitude, Prometheus would be written in Java, and we would not be here right now.
So now I understand what you were trying to say. So should we just replace everything below the first heading and say we don't have Helm maintainers and we have people who volunteer to do the React maintaining?
I think if we now said we do everything in Elm, we would get Elm maintainers. I think the most important argument is that we are not going to rewrite the current Prometheus UI in Elm. Period, right? B, we don't want different frameworks in core components of the ecosystems. So the only conclusion is, at least as soon as we can, we should do alert manager in React. But only for those 2 reasons. We don't want 2 frameworks in it, and we are already way too heavily invested in the React ecosystem. I mean, there are many other arguments you could have, but I think this two together is alone enough, and then you don't have to fight or discuss all the other arguments.
It would also implication for the push gateway that we would also want to have it in React.
Yeah,
long term.
I mean, that's pretty trivial UI, but yeah. So, I mean, our by far most complex UI in the ecosystem is in React. And when we want to unify things, we would use all the other stuff in React as well. And then we don't need to make any statements about Elm and React, and if we could get developers. This is all very controversial, but it isn't even relevant.
Would you like to rewrite that section then?
Yeah, happy to.
Okay. And while you do this, I hammer out a consensus. Consensus. We would like to avoid having multiple frameworks in Prometheus, multiple JS frameworks in Prometheus, as we have long-term volunteers. We have long-term volunteers for React work. We will migrate Alert Manager to React.
The second sentence is precisely the opposite of what I said. I think the main argument is the heaviest investment we have done UI-wise is the Prometheus UI. So it's kind of the simplest to move everything else towards that. And it would be like, it's much easier than migrate. Yeah, I mean, everything else is just repeating this in different word. Yeah, that would make most sense for me, and then we don't even have to discuss all the other parts.
Yes, totally. Consensus. We would like to avoid having multiple front-end frameworks in Prometheus. As Prometheus UI is the most complex UI, we intend to align the rest of the project with it. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Very good. And we have...
Do we have a secondary question? Like, do we have consensus that we would not do a 1.0 release of Alert Manager with Elm? Because I think at some point we would need a 1.0.
That depends on how much time Josh is volunteering, because as far as I understand, Josh is volunteering for all the things.
I mean, I would love to what's the reason behind having to do 1.0 without?
I mean, we did the Prometheus UI migration without a major version bump, so I don't feel like we need to gate Alert Manager on a UI change.
Yeah, I think UIs are not like APIs.
Okay.
I would think we shouldn't string. I mean, it would be nice if 1.0 already has that, but yeah, I don't think we need a specific statement about that.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, there's like my adversity to that sentiment, just to be transparent and clear, right, is that there's really a long list of things that I want to be able to get done with the Alert Manager. It's going to be slowly. It's going to be probably throughout this year. There's a set of ideas that I want to bring before we close the door on 1.0. And closing that door too soon will hurt us more in the short term than what it does in the long term. So at least I would like to set a realistic and completely out of thin air timeline of the end of the year before we decide on whether we want to go 1.0 or not. So it can give us some room to experiment a little bit more.
Also, a note, now that I remember it, when we moved to the Elm UI, the URLs into Alert Manager did change, and that I would consider a breaking change.
We can
Because
do it here.
those are in like those are everywhere. I have a lot of Alert Manager links floating around work.
But wouldn't, I mean, we can make this explicit, but I would explicitly expect us not to break any existing links into Alert Manager, even if they're old links.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, I mean, that would be definitely ideal.
Okay.
If we reach during development that that's one of the natures of the work, then we would definitely revisit and stop whatever we're doing and revisit. Because, yeah, we will avoid breaking links.
So consensus, we will avoid breaking existing links into Alert Manager and other UX friction. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Good. We are at time, but Matthias raised his hand, so...
No, that was a misclick. I was looking for the reactions.
Good! So, we see each other in a month or at FOSDEM, depending.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.